NSE 20 on the front foot after taking a breather in the middle of the week. We thought we would see light volumes, but that is definitely not the case. Turnover is quite high today.
Yeah, surprisingly, we had about 800 million done in equities turnover, and that was quite high. That was really driven by TPS Arena, which saw about 500 million plus, and we also saw Kenil Kobil doing a very high turnover as well, probably the highest they've done since the issues with the Kenya pipeline started.
Well, do you expect Kenil Kobil to start faring quite well going forward, given the fact that there is renewed interest in the stock?
Well, we do. I mean, usually foreign investor interest is a defining factor, especially with most of the higher cap stocks. And I think Kenil Kobil, now that they have positive investor sentiment, we do expect to see more trading on that counter. And now that we've seen foreigners interested, it means that they are confident that the resolution to the long-standing dispute is actually a positive for the company.
We had Kenya Commercial Bank kicking off third quarter earnings in today's session, and this company posting net interest income of 34%. Of course, that is quite a big increase, posting a 23% jump in gross profit as well for the first 9 months of this year. Is it pretty much in line with what you had hoped, Samuel?
Well, yes, they had the core capital to liabilities was a bit strained earlier in the year, but after they did the rights issue, they now have about 18%, and 18% from the required 8%, meaning that they're now able to lend more heavily, they're more able to do more expansion, and so that has done a lot for them. We expect the growth to accelerate. I think we're projecting something like 50% towards the end of the year.
Well, taking a look at the provisions set aside for bad debts, they've increased this, raising the cover to 1.63 billion shillings from 965 million last year. And they're talking about any unforeseen defaults. How do you expect this to play out for the company? I mean, given the fact that they are starting to raise their provisions, do you think that they foresee some slump in the market?
Well, what they're looking at is that they're ready to take on, you see, they have actually gone heavily into the mortgage sector with SNL. The other thing is we have seen banks now move back into the lower banked retail banking sector. They're trying to increase lending on that area, and that is a more risky area. So you do expect that there would be more defaults if there was any sort of economical shocks, and that means that they should be prepared for anything like that. And that is probably the reason why they're putting away a little more, to make sure that if we do get, an economic shock, they are ready for it.
Well, it's interesting because KCB is one of the largest banks by assets in Kenya. Would you be buying the stock at these levels at this point after you've seen these results, or do you think that perhaps it is time to book in some of those profits?
Well, 11, the forward PE is quite a low price. I think they have potential to, the stock price has potential to go much higher. And I think we've seen a lot of interest, especially to those banks that are lending heavily to SMEs. We're talking KCB, Equity, we're talking Cooperative Bank, and I think those are the banks to watch as we go into the fourth quarter.
Just touching on TPS Arena, we mentioned it a little earlier. We've seen quite a bit of volume coming through, turnover of around 520 million and was up around 3.2%. Just touching on the stock, because again, a very volatile stock so far this year, but one of the favorites, it seems.
Well, TPS is another one who've just had a successful rights issue. Now that means they have the funds to expand. Another thing is that the tourism sector is doing very well on the back of increased or positive risk or sentiment from investors, especially with political risk down now after the referendum, and also we have seen a very huge increase in tourism, and the expectations are that tourism will overtake the agricultural and possibly the horticultural sector as the biggest earner for the country this year.
Let's touch on the shilling. We have seen slightly a depreciating currency in today's session. The dollar, of course, gaining ground later on in trade. We did see a weaker US dollar earlier before those initial jobless claims came through. But it's also quite important to note that the central bank has been relatively active in buying up hard currency. Of course, we have been talking about this for some time now. How is the investor community perceiving this now?
Well, initially the view was that the central bank was trying to sort of keep the dollar at that rate, I think around 80. But I'm not sure about that. I think they're just shoring up their dollar reserves. What I think is that more interest right now would be towards the Japanese yen and the Chinese yuan, which have quite affected, especially the importers and the exporters heavily, because we are seeing a lot of action on that side of the world. And I think those are the ones to watch more keenly as we go forward.